What's up, everybody? I want you to ask yourself, what makes you say mean things? What makes you behave in a rude fashion? And then I want you to think about your answers to those questions, and I want you to decide and be honest. Has your mouth gotten you in trouble? Or is your mouth getting you in trouble in your relationships because you don't know how to control your tongue? That is a serious, serious question. So what we're going to talk about tonight, I'm calling it personal foul, because as you can imagine, as a therapist, man, listen, especially when I am working with my couples, the stuff that comes out of people's mouths is like, sheesh. And look, you can't unsay it. You can't take it back. And you know what people say to me? Dr. Pitts, I don't care. I don't care. I meant to say it. I meant for it to cut. I meant for it to sting and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's cool. But we're going to address that, because here's the problem with that. In addition to the fact that you can't unsay it, you have to remember that every time you go for the kill shot, you're doing damage. The stuff that is coming out of folks' mouths is disrespectful. In some cases, it may be grounds for somebody to catch hands. There's so many different additional problems that can arise when you choose, because it is a choice, and you hear me say it all the time. I know you're probably sick of hearing me say it. When you choose to not control your mouth, you're opening the door for endless amounts of problems, because you know what? Here's the thing. My husband's telling me, smile. I don't, stop it. He thinks I have angry black woman syndrome. I don't. Anyway, you have to take into consideration that you're cutting, and words scar. I tell folks all the time, the physical scars that many of us may have experienced can heal over time, but the psychological scars, the emotional scars that we can inflict upon others with our mouths, that sometimes that don't go away. It doesn't go away. So I'm going to teeter-totter with this, because I want to hit it from a number of different angles, and I want you to ask me questions. I want you to engage. I want to have a conversation with you. I want to get this information out there, because I am telling you, there is no shortage of conflict in our relationships. Folks are separating. Folks are talking about divorce. Folks are traumatizing their kids. They're traumatizing each other. There's so much toxicity going on in relationships, and a lot of it is starting because people don't know how to properly address problems and conflict in their relationships, and they end up saying things that end up being more detrimental to the healthy sustainability of the relationship. And now what do? You're in my office, you're contemplating breaking up, you're doing all of these things, you're emotionally cut off from family members and friends because of something you didn't said out your mouth that cut to the core. So we have to be able to address it. So you have to know that, you know, there's a bunch of different reasons, right, why our conflicts and our problems escalate to stuff coming out your mouth just cutting to the core. It could be something as simple as a difference of opinion. I'll use a prime example. I'm not going into details, not necessary, but we're rapidly approaching a presidential election. And just like in 2020, here we are in 2014, or excuse me, just like in 2016, here we are in 2024, and houses are divided over the political climate that exists in our country. So differences of opinion, different taste in things, you know, tomato, chocolate, vanilla, I mean, you all know I'm telling the truth. Folk are arguing and fussing and fighting in your intimate relationships with your siblings, with your parents, with your friends, with your coworkers, with your teammates. Folks are arguing and fussing and fighting over so many things. You have different taste. I don't like that. You like this. Why we have to go there? Why your perspectives are different. Part of it is just personality traits. Some of you, you just have different personalities. My husband admits, and he's listening, my husband admits that he actually can be a jerk. And there are times that he gets sheer fulfillment out of being a jerk. But what I say to him is, that opens the door for other people to engage in jerk-like tendencies. Now you got a room full of jerks, everybody got a slick, foul mouth, and now somebody in their feelings and ready to fight. Really? Why are we doing that? That makes no sense. You're arguing and fussing and fighting because you have different value systems. You have different belief systems, and you're not fighting fair. You're coming out the gate swinging. You're coming out the gate with your samurai sword that you sharpened real good before you came in. Some of you are bringing a gun to a knife fight, and you're going for the kill shot, and nothing about that says healthy, fulfilling, and sustainable relationships. So what is this all about? Why are folks' mouths so treacherous? Some of it's learned behavior. You all have heard me say, and if the Philadelphia Phillies are playing tonight, I already know that my mom is not listening to my live because her Phillies are more important than my live. But her mouth, my mom has no filter. She, to my knowledge, has never had a filter. If she thinks it, she is going to say it, and it does not matter to her if it hurts your feelings, if it makes you want to push her down in some dirt. It doesn't matter. If she thinks it, she's going to say it. And many of you are the same way. And here's the problem. There's a root to that. There is a root to that. And if I'm not mistaken, the way that it was wording when I was growing up was, you know how to get people up off of you. In other words, what was conveyed was, you can slice and dice people. You can go for the kill shot. You can go for the jugular. You can say stuff that deliberately and intentionally wounds people so deeply that one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to want to fight you or they're going to leave you alone. But here's the problem with that. That's not a healthy way to get people to treat you the way you need to be treated, the way you want to be treated, and in many cases, the way you deserve to be treated. So let's break it down. Let's take a look at why some of our discord, our problems in our relationships end up leading to these all-out verbal wars that leave folk bleeding in the street. Insecurities. Some of you are so insecure that people who genuinely and sincerely love you and care about you and may be putting forth a sincere effort to offer you constructive criticism or to give you positive feedback, that if you were responsible enough, teachable enough, healthy enough, you would actually apply what's being communicated to you to address your insecurities. But instead, what ends up happening is somebody says something to you that you don't like that really could be constructive, but because you have an insecurity around whatever it is that they've shared with you, you go for the kill shot. You go to cussing folk out and talking about their mama and saying all of this stuff, and it's like, okay, all I said was X, Y, and Z. And now you making it personal on a whole nother level because what I said, even though I didn't say it in a demeaning, belittling, degrading way, it stung. Because the truth hurts. But just because the truth hurts at times doesn't mean that it needs to be yielded like a samurai sword. There is a compassionate and healthy and loving way to communicate the truth that doesn't leave the person that you're communicating to emotionally hemorrhaging because you just slit their throat with your verbal samurai sword. For some people, they go into attack mode because they have low self-esteem. They're constantly comparing themselves to other people, and they think that, you know, everybody's judging them, everybody's criticizing them, everybody's telling them that there's something wrong with them. So the way that they address their low self-esteem, oftentimes that's coupled with insecurities, is this mouth is fire. They're a fire-breathing dragon, and the way that they keep people at bay is this clinical term, this maladaptive coping skill, this negative coping skill that says, if I can breathe fire, I can keep people away from me, I can keep people up off of me, and I can, for real, stay in my dysfunction. Some people carry on this way because hurting people hurt people. They're hurting, they're not willing or don't know how to do the necessary work or to get the help that they need to feel better, so they just breathe fire. They think that the best way to soothe their own pain is to inflict pain upon others, doing more damage. It's a vicious cycle. You've heard me use the term before, core negative interaction pattern. So many people are locked into these core negative interaction patterns that they don't even realize that, and you hear me say it almost every week, what you feed grows. So if you're hurting and you're making a conscious decision to lash out at other people by using your mouth as a flamethrower, you're ultimately doing more damage. And that vicious cycle continues, because what you really want, if you're honest, is to be loved. What you really want, if you're honest, is to be respected and valued and appreciated and seen and heard. But because you are the walking wounded, you a flamethrower with this mouth to keep people up off of you instead of addressing what really needs to be addressed. Some of you, and I use my mom as an example all the time. She knows the truth is the truth. It is what it is. Some of you, this shooting this fire is a family trait. Everybody in your, and I will tell you, let me just say, that the Pitts family, we are the kings and queens of sarcasm. We absolutely, we have slick mouths. We do. But what I will say is that, and I'm sure there are those in the family that operate from this place in space, but it's not the norm that people are just going for the kill shot out the gate. Like there's usually some form of provocation before they're doing that. And like I said, you know, I don't interact with everybody in my family every day, and my family is ginormous, so I'm sure that to some degree that may exist. But one thing sure and certain, this flamethrower for a mouth is learned behavior. And for many of us, it stems, you know, your mama had a slick mouth, your daddy had a slick mouth, your grandmama had a slick mouth, folk had a slick mouth. And if we're honest, part of how you learned it is because your parents or your primary caregivers sliced and diced you with their mouth. So you learned as an unhealthy defense mechanism how to get people up off of you, because that was how you all exchanged in your family. So you learned it. On that very same note, if you're someone who grew up in a household that was constantly being criticized or belittled or degraded or demeaned, again, it was instilled in you to use your mouth as a flamethrower, which is a negative defense mechanism to get people up off of you. And what that translates into is, and I'm sure this will make sense to you, it's probably fair to say that you were surrounded by people and grew up in environments that were very judgmental and that were very critical. And That, in a lot of ways, is rooted in insecurity. But I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. So one of the things that that somebody just typed in the Instagram link was, asking me if I felt comfortable referencing someone that I previously used to deal with, who, because of an indiscretion on my part at one point in time in the relationship, that the person never forgave me for, the number one weapon of choice when it came to dealing with me was the flamethrower mouth. It was like there was nothing off limits. My sexual orientation, my looks, my intelligence, my attitude, my parenting skills, my family system. Like, there was literally no area of my life that this individual didn't attack. And this was on the coattails of me being very deliberate and intentional, in offering sincere apology for the original indiscretion, and then literally, to my own fault, continuing to try to right that wrong. And then it clicked one day, like, wait a minute, I was doing the best I could for who I was and where I was at that particular season in my life, when my actions caused this person a tremendous amount of pain. However, that does not mean that I have to continuously tolerate being berated, being belittled and degraded and demeaned and literally verbally singed with the fire of the individual's mouth because of a mistake that I had made many years prior. So for some of you, that may be your story too. Some of you may be in a place and space, and I will tell you, I keep it real with you. I tolerated that behavior for a really long time because I was the walking wounded, and I had convinced myself that I deserved to be handled that way. But I'm here to tell you, nobody deserves to abuse you. Nobody has a right to abuse you, to neglect you, to mistreat you. You don't have to tolerate that behavior. And part of how you address that is you have to acknowledge the error of your ways. You have to be willing to right your wrongs, understanding that some people are not going to accept your apology. And that is their choice. You cannot make people accept your apology. But what you can do is love yourself enough to not allow that person to verbally assassinate you because of something that you've previously done wrong. There's no other way to say that. When you're dealing with someone who perhaps is judgmental or critical in your life, I want you to remember this term. It's a cute little fancy term. I want to give you some insight on how to reduce your toxic quarrel quotient, your TQQ. You want to reduce your toxic quarrel quotient. In other words, I'm getting ready to give you some tips on how you can remove yourself from the equation, because you do know that people can't argue with themselves. If you engage in the verbal battle, then it escalates. It's a bonfire burning out of control. But somebody has to go high. And let me just tell you, I know that is like a curse word to some of you because I hear it all the time. Dr. Pitts, I'm not going to have nobody treat me any old type of way. And I know how to get people up off of me. Hasn't anybody ever told you that two wrongs will never make a right? So because somebody hurt you, you're willing to get down in the gutter, stoop to their level, and do more damage. And what ends up happening is you get to a point sometimes where so much damage is done that you can't undo it. And you can't undo it because you can't unsay it. And folk don't forget. They don't forget that you called them everything but a child of God. They don't forget that you told them they wasn't nothing, their mama wasn't nothing, their daddy wasn't nothing, and they wasn't gonna never be nothing. Folk, somebody on Instagram is saying that's a powerful statement. When you argue with a fool, you become a fool. That right there, mic drop, boom. That's real. And folks don't realize that. Folks are so busy running on emotion and showing people how, what if I can show you better than I can tell you. Folks are so busy showing people through this fiery mouth that ends up telling folks through this fiery mouth that they act like they don't even realize that the damage that they are doing to their relationships oftentimes is irreparable. I have said countless times over the years that just because someone tells you that they respect you does not mean that they do. Just because you've instilled the fear of God in somebody doesn't mean that they do. And I am here to I have said, total transparency, I have said, if I lose respect for you, I am prone to say or do anything to you. Because it's easy, be honest, don't leave me out here hanging to dry. It's easy to hurt somebody that you don't respect. It's easy to hurt somebody that you've made the decision that you don't give a rat's boo-boo about them. It becomes very, very easy. So you have to be willing to take a step back and disengage. Everything doesn't have to be a fight. Everything doesn't have to be proven. I've shared this before. I'm going to share it again because it's profound, and it's one of the wisest things that somebody ever said to me. My first husband's mother said to me many years ago, she said, Lauren, you gonna mess around and be dead right. And I said, Mom, what do you mean? She said, true wisdom, true maturity says that being right is enough. You don't have to make a public service announcement that you're right, because picking that battle in the wrong relationship can get you jammed up and cause you a whole bunch of problems. Because why? Because when the tongues get to flapping and folk have made it up in their mind that all bets are off and the gloves are coming off, you get to saying stuff that, remember what I said a few minutes ago, that will either make folk want to fight you or make folk want to leave you alone. But a lot of folks will throw hands. Aren't we too old for that? I mean, really, aren't we too old to be fighting because somebody called you a blue? I said to my husband one time, a big part of the reason why I don't go there is because I know that I have the capability to say some stuff out of this mouth that will make folk swing. I'm sure of it. There's no doubt in my mind. I know how to make you swing. And a lot of you know how to make folks swing too. But then you have to ask yourself, is this a fight that you really want? Really? At 25, 35, 45, 55, 60 some years old? Do you really want to be in the streets fighting because you done said something slick out your mouth and they done said something slick and now you throwing hands? Come on, y'all. And then we wonder why the schools has turned out. Kids that, look, guns and knives and gang fight, like the public school system and probably some of the private school systems just as crazy too. Why? Because the kids going to school telling the teachers that they fat and ugly and dumb and I don't have to listen to what you say. Then call the teachers stupid. The teacher got self-esteem issues and now she mad. Now she done targeted your child because your child done embarrassed her in front of the whole class, but your child got that mouth from you. So now what? So we're breeding generations of flamethrowers. And at some point in time, folks got to decide if they're going to keep perpetuating this craziness or if folk are going to learn healthier, more appropriate ways to resolve conflict and problems without burning the house and everybody in it down with your mouth. So how do we deal with judgmental people? How do we deal with these folks that are the walking wounded, the insecure folks, the low self-esteem folks, the folks that are totally okay hurting people because they hurt, the people that learn this flamethrowing mouth from their family and their trauma and all of this stuff? How do we address all of the unresolved childhood trauma that you have that has exacerbated your adult trauma that has put you in this place and space where you're walking around with a flamethrower for a mouth? I'm so glad you asked. Well, for starters, it's not always all about you. Dr. Pitts, what do you mean? There are people, like, check this out, right? If I say to you in my inside voice, very calm, very respectful, very humane conversation, hey, so-and-so, this behavior really leaves me feeling A, B, and C. And it's really bothering me. And I would really appreciate it if you don't do that anymore. And you go cold slap off on me, and I haven't screamed, yelled, hooped, hollered, cussed, fussed. I ain't talked about your mama. I ain't said nothing out the way other than my feelings being impacted by your negative behaviors, and you rip my whole face off. What that tells me is that there is something deeper going on in you that for real has nothing to do with me. Because we should all be able to express how a situation, a circumstance, another person's behavior is impacting us. And yes, each of us has to take responsibility and accountability for our emotional experiences. In that, though, let's be honest, it's very, very clear when somebody is coming at you and they're deliberately trying to hurt your feelings. It's very clear when somebody is deliberately coming at you with the intention of insulting you or disrespecting you or belittling or degrading or demeaning you. That's not rocket science. That's pretty clear. So you have a right to be able to communicate your displeasure with that behavior. I already said you don't have to roll in the gutter with folks. Just because they go low doesn't mean you have to. This is what I say to my clients. There's going to come a point in time, hopefully, if you want to be healthy and learn to be an effective, healthy communicator, there's going to come a point in time where you're going to decide who you are authentically, how you want to be received, and how you want to navigate life. Seriously. So if you want to be Betty Bad Butt and Billy Bad Butt and you want folk to be scared of you and all this other stuff, that's a conversation for another live. I'm not talking to you. But for those of you that genuinely and sincerely want to be decent, respectful, warm, loving, humane individuals, why would you surrender your power and your authenticity to somebody by stooping to their level and rolling around in the gutter with them? Maybe you need to shake your tree of life and reevaluate how much access you're allowing that person to have to you if every time you turn around they got something slick to say and they're blatantly disregarding your feelings and disrespecting you whenever they feel like it with their mouth. That's your choice. But what you don't have to do is stoop to their level and allow their ignorance to cause you to behave in a way that's totally out of character for you. Here's another one. This is a mic drop. I'm going to confess. This one at times in my life has been a work on for me. We have to be mindful of our own judgmental tendencies. In other words, even though you may not think that you have come at a person in an inappropriate way, is your language or your attitude or the topic that you're addressing, could it be interpreted by that person that you're being judgmental and critical of them? And it's something that's been an ongoing problem, that because they're uncertain of how to put a firm boundary in place with you around that, they don't know how to address it. So you come at them in a judgmental and critical way, even though you might not be yelling, hooting, and hollering, and cussing and fussing, but they're still perceiving that you're judging them or criticizing them or putting them down, and they come at your neck because that's the only way they know to get you up off of them. So you have to be willing to evaluate whether or not you have a tendency to be judgmental and critical of other people. In other words, what is your contribution to this firestorm of words? When we're in these exchanges, if folk could just stop being defensive, be willing to pause for a minute and really reflect upon, is this a personal attack? Is this person genuinely and sincerely attacking me? And because what we know to be true, right, is that defensiveness comes from people feeling like they need to defend themselves if they feel like they're being subjected to a character assassination or whatever the case may be. But again, even with defensiveness, you have to look at, are you being overly sensitive? Are you taking things too personal? Is there any truth in what the person is saying? And yes, I know that delivery matters. I'm not suggesting that it doesn't. But just because somebody's delivery may be jacked up doesn't mean that they're not sharing truth that can be beneficial for your growth, development, and healing. You want to give consideration, or clinically what I say is you have to give consideration to their whole story. In other words, what is it about their upbringing and the environment in which they grew up in that may be fueling them coming at you the way that they're coming at you? And oh, by the way, shut up, husband. And oh, by the way, how can you hold somebody accountable for something or be angry at somebody for treating you in a way that you've consistently allowed? You can't hold somebody accountable for behaving in a way that you have not communicated to them is problematic. People have different standards of behavior and interaction. I hear clients, for real, the stuff that my clients share with me that they say to each other when they're angry is like, yeah, I remember saying to a couple that I was working with a couple of weeks ago, and they were, going through some things, and I said, you could never talk to me like that. Like, no. Mm-mm. Nope, 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 nope. There's just some things that are just not okay. And if people are like, well, Dr. Pitts, how do you put consequences in place? How do you put boundaries and consequences in place for breaking them with adults? I said, perhaps I'm the wrong clinician to ask about that, because I set the standard for how people treat me, and any form of abuse, neglect, and maltreatment is not flying. You got to go. See ya. Bye-bye. You have voided your intimate access to me because you're demonstrating through your mouth and through your behavior that you don't deserve to have intimate access to me. But that's me. Y'all have to figure it out for yourself. I'm just giving you the tools. But I am here to tell you, each of us teaches people how to treat us. And anything that you tolerate, whether you dislike it or not, it's the same thing as saying that it's okay. So it's like I tell folks, I know people who chopping it up with, the guys are chopping it up and they boys and they, this, that, and the third, and they call each other out their name. And I said, look here, Lauren Denise Pitts. That's what's on my birth certificate. Everybody has a nickname for me and my family. Literally, nobody calls me Lauren. If somebody calls me Lauren, it means that I'm in trouble with one of my parents, because as a rule, nobody calls me Lauren. But they're not calling me a whole bunch of other filth, Florin, filth. It's not happening. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. And there's consequences for breaking those rules. Just saying. Just saying. So, what else? Is this somebody that you have to interact with on a regular? Can you shake your tree of life and limit the time that you spend around the person? If you find yourself in a situation, all right, husband, no comments. If you find yourself in a situation where you're interacting with somebody, and every time you find yourself interacting with them, your chest is tight, and you got that pit in your stomach, and you grinding your teeth and got your fist balled up, hello, it is time for you to limit your time spent interacting with them, because it is a key indication that there is something going on with that verbal communication that is taking you to a place that before long, if you don't check it, flamethrower, that fire's coming. Why would you give that power to somebody? You don't have to do that. You don't do that. Refrain from their judgments. And like, here's the thing, right? And I've said this before. I want to say it was in Tyler Perry's Diary of a Mad Black Woman. Medea was saying that it's not what people say to you, it's what you say to yourself. So what I'm saying is that if somebody calls me stupid, I'm not taking that to heart. I'm just not. Like, I'm not taking that to heart, because I know that I'm not stupid. If somebody tells me that I'm ugly, I'm not taking that to heart, because I don't believe that I'm ugly. Doesn't mean that I'm, your flavor or whoever's, or that you need to think whatever. But that's the piece about taking things too personal, right? Just because somebody has an opinion of you doesn't necessarily mean that it's an accurate opinion of you, and it does not mean that you have to internalize their opinion of you. You do have the option of rejecting what is not serving you well. What I recommend that folks do is, if you got several people telling you the same thing, you probably should take a look at whatever it is that they're saying. But if it's just one person, it could be a situation. It could be an isolated incident where you were having a bad day and you said something slick that hurt somebody's feelings or something. Fix it. But if you're getting the same feedback over and over and over again from the same person or different people, that's an indication to you that there's something that you need to be working on. I had somebody say to me earlier today, we were talking about emotional safety and being able to speak openly and honestly when whomever it is you're interacting with insist on saying stuff that hurts your feelings. And I had worked diligently with this client to help them to practice their assertive communication skills. And the client came into session today and said, Dr. Pitts, I did everything that you said. And the person said, emotional safety, what's that? That sounds like your problem, not mine. And I said, that's an indication that that person is the walking wounded. Because if I'm saying to you that you talking to me in this certain way, and you saying A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, leads me to believe that you don't respect me, that you don't even like me, and you don't want to deal with me. And then you can clearly see that I'm going through something, and you ask me what's wrong, and my response to you is, I'm not really wanting to have that conversation right now. Why? Well, you can talk to me about anything. No, I can't. I'm not emotionally safe with you. And you prove my point by saying, that sounds like your problem, not mine. Really? So, yeah, won't be confiding in you because you won't take responsibility and accountability for your response. You're not behaving in a humane way. If somebody is saying, ouch, that hurts, ouch, that hurts, ouch, that hurts, and your response is, the fact that that hurts is your problem, not mine, really? Might have to catch these hands. And I'm trying to keep people from throwing hands. So we've got to be willing to put them respectfully in their place. You got to call folks out on stuff. And calling folks out on stuff isn't engaging in the fight. It's being mature and responsible and respectful and doing your due diligence to separate the person from the behavior and say, hey, it bothers me. I'm gonna give you a prime example. My husband says that I'm transparent all the time. Because I tell y'all all the time I'm a human therapist. So the past couple of months I have been really, really, really going through some things. Have just been really, really, really going through a very, very, very challenging time. And even though I was cognizant of the fact that things were getting on my nerves, I was not cognizant of the fact that I was being short and snappy with my husband. But he called me out on it. He didn't do it in the moment. He waited until I had a more level head in the moment and was just real simple. Hey, can I talk to you for a minute? I understand. He led in with affirming language. I think he got that from a therapist, but he led in with affirming language, acknowledging the fact that he understands that I've been under an exorbitant amount of stress lately and that, I feel like I'm being pulled in 5,000 different directions and blah, blah, blah. He said, however, though, you've been coming downstairs guns blazing. And then he did this because he's animated and theatrical. He did this, the move from the Terminator, the one with the liquid nitrogen dude, and he was like, and I never said a word. I listened. I apologized, and I took responsibility and accountability for the fact that I know better, and therefore, because I know better, I must do better. And even though the stress level has been extremely high because there's so much going on, I still have to show up in a very humane and decent and respectful way and be okay with being called out directly on the behavior that I was engaging in that was problematic for him. You have to be mindful about what you're sharing whenever it is you're communicating, right? And the reason, let me explain what I mean by this. Because a lot of times, remember when I was saying that part of the conflict and the problems that arise in our relationships is because of differing opinions or beliefs or values or whatever the case may be. You have to know your audience. You can't talk to everybody about everything. People are it's amazing how people want to avoid emotion, but let it be something that rubs up against their value system, or that rubs up against their belief system, or that rubs up against their hotspot. They'll rip your whole face off. You have to be willing to recognize that, you know what, there's just some things I can't talk to you about, because I don't want it to end up in an argument. I don't want us to get into a woo-woo contest, you know, to see who can say the meanest stuff out their mouth. So we're not going to discuss politics. We're not going to discuss abortion rights. We're not going to discuss, you know, single guys hanging out with married guys and encouraging them to cheat, and women hanging out with their married women hanging out with their single girlfriends, and get all of those things can be really, really, really hot topics. So what role does your hot topics play in whether or not your mouth is a flamethrower? You get to decide if your relationships are going to be minefields or not. You get to decide. And part of that is you have to be willing to have a mature, responsible, rational, calm conversation about what your hot topics are. And everything shouldn't be a hot topic. Before my husband and I even started dating, I want to say it was like literally the very first conversation we had when we first connected. We were on the phone for 5.5 hours. We talked about what our hot spots were. And I conveyed mine, I believe, with great clarity. He certainly conveyed his with great clarity. And we don't go there. We do not go there, because we recognize that it has the ability to take this relationship someplace that we do not, under any circumstances, want it to go. The other thing that you have to take into consideration is the importance, and this might sound strange the way that I'm going to say this, is you have to understand the importance of learning and respecting what sets each other off, and put those firm boundaries around those things. Like, for real, and I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you, you know, a guideline in my life. Your parents is off limits. You know, you're a blended family. Please don't say nothing slick out your mouth about my children. You don't say nothing slick. I can say whatever I want about them, but you can't. You have to put that firm boundary in place. You have to respect the fact that that can open up a can of worms that you can't get the worms back in the can. So you have to be deliberate and intentional about what you're saying out of your mouth as it relates to those hot topics, because for some folks, depending on the nature and sensitivity of whatever it is, folk automatically, them's fighting words. You can't talk about folks' mamas. You can't talk about folk daddy. You can't call your stepchild little. Come on now. You think folk ain't gonna want to fight? And then they done pulled the gloves off. Now they talking about your mama. They done talking about your crazy grandpop and all these things. And now everybody, man, catch feelings. Now everybody want to fight. And you can't go to the family reunion because you so mad you done went and told your papa that he said that you was drunk and dumb, and that your mom, like, y'all know how folk do. You can't. You can't do that. It's gonna blow up in your face. What are you doing wrong? I just told you a bunch of things you're doing wrong. But let me clarify it for you. I'm going to categorize everything that I just said into 5 categories that I want you to be intentional in taking a look at, and look in the mirror and really think about, you know what? I do that. And if I want to get better at communicating, if I want to get better at problem solving and resolving conflicts in my life and in my relationships, I've got to own my junk, and I have to be willing to do better and be better. So what are you doing wrong? You're criticizing, you're blaming, and you're taking personal attacks, and you accusing. And anytime, here's an indication of when you're criticizing. Your statement starts with you. You said, you did, you're fat, you're ugly, you're dumb, you're stupid, you're lazy, you're trifling, you stink, you're you. When you're criticizing, it starts with you. You're pointing the finger. In contrast, though, when you're complaining, you're making negative comments about something that you wish was different. And usually that starts with I. I wish that you would clean up after yourself. I wish that you would wipe the stove off. I wish that you would put the toilet seat down. I wish that you would stop nagging me. I wish that you would stop driving my car. I wish that you would teach these kids some home training. I wish you would learn how to cook. You complaining. You're in contempt. The judge of life is holding you in contempt. Dr. Pitts, what does that mean? It means that you are deliberately insulting and making a conscious decision to psychologically abuse whomever it is that you're communicating with. You're gaslighting. And you're doing it on purpose. You're defensive. Here's the thing about defensiveness. Remember I said that it's a learned negative coping skill oftentimes that goes all the way back to childhood. If you grew up in a home where you learned defensiveness as a protective factor and then it turned into a negative coping skill, now you 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, how many ever years old, it's reflex. So you have to be willing to acknowledge it so that you can begin to retrain yourself to not respond to the history of insults or other negative attacks that you've experienced throughout your life's journey. In essence, when you're defensive, you're in victim mode. And you don't want to navigate life in victim mode. And then the other category that I'm sort of umbrelling all of this into is stonewalling. And basically stonewalling is where you just get to the point where you're so emotionally overwhelmed that you shut down. And here's the thing, anybody can do it, but relationship and human behavior research shows that 85% of people in this country who stonewall are men. When you think about it conceptually, it makes sense because so oftentimes our men are taught that addressing their feelings is a sign of weakness and therefore lacks masculinity. So you have to be willing to recognize, hey, I'm feeling emotionally overwhelmed, and learn how to have discussions around what you're feeling. So I say all this to say what? I need you to fix your mouth. How do I fix my mouth, Dr. Pitts? I'm so glad you asked. One, you have to be willing to learn how to communicate assertively. And your ability to communicate assertively is going to require you to heal. It's going to require you to forgive. It's going to require you to humble yourself. And it's going to require you to actually show up as a mature, responsible adult. What that looks like in more detail is you have to choose your battles wisely. Everything is not a fight. You're going to mess around and be dead right. Everything doesn't have to be a fight. Everything is not a crisis. Everything is not a catastrophe. Everything is not the end of the world. Everything is not requiring this insane sense of urgency. That's some control freak stuff that you're going to want to get under control. You have to be intentional about improving your assertive communication skills, which means you need to do some research and find out, what does assertive communication look like and how can I begin to practice it so that I can improve my communication and thereby improve my relationships. You have to clearly define what you're really upset about. People can tell me all day, every day, how angry they are. Doctor, I was so enraged. People can talk about the mad. You have to learn how to put your finger on the pulse of what it is you're really feeling. I'm angry. Anger is a secondary emotion. It's the camouflage and the smoke and mirrors of what you're really feeling. Are you embarrassed? Are you ashamed? Are you humiliated? Do you feel disrespected? Do you feel dishonored? Are you afraid? Do you feel ashamed? Do you feel humiliated? Do you feel, fill in the blank? Put your finger on the pulse of your authentic feelings. You have to resist the temptation. I said it earlier, I'm saying it again. You have to resist the temptation to go for the jugular. Stop hurling insults. Stop taking the cheap shots. Stop going for the low blows. Stop making a conscious decision to inflict pain because you're hurting. At some point in time, you got to stop the blood flow. You have to continue these firestorms of verbal assassinations and incinerations. You're going to continue to hemorrhage emotionally, and you're going to continue to inflict emotional hemorrhaging on people that you profess to love and care about. Don't take the cheap shots. And I say this with the utmost respect and humility. Grow up. It's time to grow up. That's all I got. I have to go to session now. Hope y'all got something from this. Tell your family members, tell your friends. Dr. Pitts is live every Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 6 o'clock Central, speaking on a wealth of different topics every week. Share, 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 share. Apply, 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 apply. Hey, look, folks. I'm doing these relationship boot camps. I hope to see some of you in next month's boot camp. Going to be some powerful, powerful blood, guts, and gore tips and strategies to help you to get your relationship on track, to keep your relationship on track, and to have a healthier, more fulfilling, and sustainable relationship than you've ever had in your life. Until next week, peace. See you.